Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name is Adam. I am your host, where we discover the journeys of folks on the way to a fulfilling life. Today, my guest is Shay Sandifer. She is based out of Arizona, a self-described mompreneur. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Good job. Yes, you did.
There you go. Shay has established careers starting with hairstyling, where she was able to conquer that world. Now she is in the world of real estate, an avid fitness enthusiast. And I'm so grateful that you took the time this morning. I know it is 7 a.m. out there in Arizona. Much appreciated for you to spare some time with me, Shay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you so much for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. We've had a couple discussions, and I really enjoyed every conversation that we've had together. I really just kind of wanted to jump into it. I know that you've been out in Arizona most of your life, originally from California. Can you walk me through just kind of the early days of Shay and what it was like growing up?
My parents and I hail from Guatemala. We moved to the United States when I was 10 months old. It was quite the journey since then. Loved living in California. I had a wonderful childhood. But my parents have always made it a point to live the American dream, or at least strive for it, right? So that was really something that has always been part of my life. I've worked alongside my mother in her own business for a really long time. Again, like I said, I loved my childhood in California. I lived in Southern California in Orange County. So going to the beach was a regular thing for me. So I have a hard time living in the desert, but now I'm stuck here climbing mountains. So I had a pretty good childhood. I learned a lot. I was an only child until I was about 15 when my parents had my brother. And that was a whole nother experience of growth and adaptability when it came to that. But it was a great upbringing alongside my parents, and both of them really finding themselves because they were young parents with me. So.
Yeah. So talk about that. You have a 15-year age gap between you and your brother. What was it like? I mean, 15 is a very crucial period of time in just personal development and just getting to know who you are. What was it like having a baby in the house? How did that affect you and your responsibilities?
I consider myself to be like a second mom to him because I was 15 and a lot of the responsibility fell on me. My mom went through a lot to have my brother. She had a lot of fertility issues that led to her having a pregnancy so late in life. And she had multiple surgeries before and after having my brother. So there was a lot of responsibility on me. I also believe that that's the reason maybe I took a little bit longer to start my family and have kids, because it was such a big responsibility, but I loved every second of it. I remember being in high school and I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to be with my brother. I wanted to take care of my baby and read books. And, I'm a nurturer by nature. And I feel like part of my purpose was definitely to be a mother. So it was a big change. It was also, it gave me a perspective on like hard work. There's so many young moms, and I mean, I wasn't one, but I could resonate with them and how difficult it is to balance motherhood, responsibility, priorities while still trying to build life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously also when it came to parental attention, did it affect you? Strike me as someone who's discovered their independence at a very early age. Do you think that having your brother 15, when you were 15, you kind of had this freedom where you were like, all right, they're going to focus on him and, now I'm just going to do my thing. And was it like that at all?
No, not at all. My parents are very, I guess I could say old school in the sense that they have a lot of expectation. And there were a
Got
lot
it.
of expectations on me. So not only was I expected to all hands on deck when it came to my brother, but also I was a straight A student. As far as I can remember, my goal was always, well, originally my desire was to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a
Mm.
lawyer. I worked really hard. So me having a little baby brother at home didn't change that whatsoever. And neither did my parents let up on the fact that that's what I wanted and that's what they expected. So being an overachiever wasn't really necessarily like an option. It was what I needed to do because that's what the expectation was. So my grades couldn't falter. I didn't party. Like I wasn't the type of kid that could go party. I was always involved in multiple things. I was in academic decathlon. So I
Mm.
competed in academics. Like I was your
Wait,
quote unquote nerd.
break that down for a second. Academic decathlon.
Yes.
So there
Um,
were 10 academic events that you competed in?
yes. It was literally everything you can imagine. And mine happened to be speech because I love to debate in an educational way. But yeah, I did academic decathlon. I was the captain of my cheer team. I was also a dancer at a Phoenix Academy after school. I also, once I started my junior year, I got a job as well. So it was never like I had freedom as far as just, no, my parents didn't care about me anymore. It was all about my brother. It was definitely
Yeah.
not that.
That's awesome. And, like, I want to go back to what you said, we had like old school parents. I myself as well did, where they came from a very traditional culture and they had these expectations and they were somewhat strict. And, growing up, kind of looking around and watching the way other people's parents handled parenting and brought them. Did you notice the stark difference between the way other people were being raised and you, like I did?
Oh, yes. I have one funny story that I love to tell, and I tell that now to my kids because I was invited to a birthday party. It was a quinceañera. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hispanic culture, but it's like the sweet
Yeah.
15 party when a girl becomes a woman, that whole thing. So I was invited to a party, and that was the only party my mother ever said yes. But unbeknownst to me, it was because, well, she was going with me. That was the only way I was
Mhm.
going to that party. It was I was having a chaperone, and my mom went with me. After that, I never even asked.
Really?
I just didn't. So yeah, a lot all throughout childhood. I couldn't, do sleepovers. It was, I think, more of a protection thing that I understand now that I'm a parent. It was definitely more of the protection. Like they didn't want anything to happen to me. They wanted to make sure I was on the straight and narrow. I didn't get into, extracurricular bad behaviors and that sort of thing. But yeah, after I showed up to a party with my mom, I didn't go to another party again.
That's funny. Yeah, I couldn't imagine going to any of the parties that I went to with my mom or especially my dad. But yeah, I mean, like when you come from a traditional upbringing, it is just like somewhat of a culture difference as well, where American culture and traditional cultures is depending on like where you stand. Like it for me, I felt like I was under a tremendous amount of pressure growing up. My parents also were like doctor or lawyer, and I was neither. My dad was neither. And, and it was kind of like I now know that they wanted opportunity for me that they didn't have. So they wanted, and that's that was their way of conveying it. Um, so as you growing up in California, talk to me about when you guys decided to move from Orange County to Arizona.
So my dad worked for a really long time at a manufacturing company in Southern California, and that company actually went out of business. So it was one of those things where he was offered to move his family to West Virginia to continue to work for this company because he had made himself pretty a predominant figure in the company, and he loved working there. He was there for about 20 years.
Mm.
Um, so it was West Virginia or find something else. At the time, my dad has a cousin that has had moved to Arizona all by himself. He kind of came out, built like a life here in Arizona, and my dad came out, visited, and he actually fell in love with it. And he saw the opportunity because we came early on before the explosion and boom of Arizona growth. And my dad got into construction moving out here. So he loved it. And it was one of those things, sat me and my mom down and was like, this is where I see our future. This is where I see, some more growth. We can own property in Arizona, where in California it was becoming very difficult for us to do that.
Mm.
And that's how it happened. I didn't have a choice. I think I cried for about 4 months straight when I moved here because I
Mm.
was not happy. But it soon became evident that this was where we were supposed to grow.
Absolutely. I mean, big changes like that can rock your world. I mean, talk to me a little bit about like the transition and what you did to accept the new surroundings.
It was rough, especially being a teenager. You're going through so many changes that you don't understand as it is, let alone completely changing your environment and not knowing anybody and starting from zero. Um, it was difficult. Like I said, I cried a lot because I had such a full life in California. My best friend, who I kind of say that his dad was my biggest influence growing up because he was a lawyer, and I had such a great bond with him and his family. My mom was their nanny for a very, very long time, so we grew up together. He was 2 years old, and I was 3 years old when we started, that um, part of life with my mom. So I grew up. They were my family. He was my best friend. We were together every single day. We grew up together. We would go to Disneyland every day. His dad was a lawyer for Disneyland, so that was a
Oh,
huge
really?
influence in my life. Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
like I said, we were always at the beach. They owned a house in Laguna Beach, and we were there every weekend or you know summertime. My mom and I would come up, and I had built such a great foundation there that it was very hard. However, like I said, when being a little bit older and having that openness with my parents of like, listen, this is what the future kind of is providing for us. We need to make the best of it. There's so much opportunity here um, that it didn't take me too long to kind of flip the scenario and see it like, well, I could always move back if I wanted to, or who knows what
Mm.
the future holds. As long as I stick to what I want to do and focus on my future and what I want, I mean, I could do whatever I want once I accomplish what I want to accomplish. So that turned around pretty quickly.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, like having that mentality where you're like, all right, like let's work with it. That's so important when it comes to just big life changes. And now that you're settling into this new community, um, how were you were in your late teens at that point, and your brother was like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So he spent his whole life out there, for the most part, as far as he can
Yes.
remember. And um, when you first began to explore what you actually went to, obviously you didn't become a lawyer. What was the process like? Like, when did you kind of not accept, but just understand that you're probably not going to be a lawyer, and you transition into a different career?
I actually did go to college and I got a justice degree in my bachelor's in justice studies. So the goal was always to do that up until I was an adult. Like I still kept very strong on that was what I wanted to do. I was all about it. I actually started college when I was a sophomore in high school. Very much a nerd. I
Those
graduated high
academic
school as
decathlons paid off.
it
Like,
was all of
damn.
it. Yeah, all of the things. Yeah, like I said, overachiever over here. Yeah, I graduated high school as a sophomore in college. So it was always the goal, that was always the plan. But once it got real, I realized this was like right before I was graduating ASU, getting, I had applied to a bunch of law schools. I actually really wanted to go to a law school in Chicago. So that was also another transition that I was kind of looking at, like, wow, I'm going to move to the Midwest. And although I love Chicago, it's my favorite city in the world. It was big. But then the reality hit of not only was law school going to be very expensive, and I mean, I come from humble beginnings, so it was all going to fall on me and my parents to figure out how to pay for law school. And then also dealing with a little bit of the burnout, because I was so very much hard on myself and pushed myself for so many years and so long. My entire life revolved around, I'm going to be a lawyer. Like this was all, there was nothing else for me. And then I got the burnout. I thought about maybe I just need to take like a year off. I'll go, work at a law firm. I actually had started the summer after I graduated at a law firm, thinking I just need to take a little break, figure out what I want to do. And at the time, I mean, I had always been pretty girly. I love hair. I love makeup. I've, always been into that, but I never saw it as a career. So my year off, I decided, well, I'm just going to go to beauty school. I think it'd be fun. It's different. It's creative. I needed a creative outlet because I'm a very creative person. And that's definitely not a character trait of a lawyer. So I needed to explore that a little bit. So I went to beauty school and I fell in love with it. And I really felt a whole nother sense and outlook on purpose and on how much I valued the creative side of me and how much I actually needed that outlet. And then my business mentality kind of kicked in because I knew that I was going to have to put in some time after graduating beauty school in a salon. I had to assist and, learn from my peers in a salon for a little while. Then I saw it as, well, then I can either open my own salon or I can work for myself or I can travel and do hair and makeup or, whatever the case may be. So I saw this completely different picture that I felt was worth giving to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, did you find that like you were in such a tunnel vision for law school that it limited you from really exploring other things that might have interested you? So when that burnout was essentially like a blessing where you're able to like kind of pause and self-reflect. So like that's pretty awesome where you discovered something that you fell in love with. What was it like making that shift, and how did your family react to that?
That was the biggest and the hardest moment of my life because I did feel like I was going to disappoint my parents heavily, especially because I did put in so much time and effort and I was so one-track mind. And for me to be like, hey, guess what? Like, I'm not going to law school. I'm going to go be your hairdresser. It was terrifying. And I expected the worst. But my parents kind of got it. Like I explained to them, like, this is what I see. This is a whole nother book of opportunity that I really want to see that, see where it goes. And it was a little difficult, especially for my dad, because my dad, again, he brought his family to this country to pursue the ultimate American dream. And for him to see, me achieve something that I worked so long and hard for, I think for him it was a little bit harder to digest, but ultimately he was like, it's your life.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. I mean, the support that you got from them, but also I can totally understand going to them and being like afraid to disappoint them. But I think that's awesome because a lot of the time in my story, I was doing things because that's what I felt was expected of me from my parents. And yeah, the fear of disappointment and having kind of faced that fear at a very like pivotal moment in your life and theirs, obviously, because they have to accept, hey, listen, like this is what makes her happy. And you associate the word purpose with it, and that was the first stepping stone for you to kind of really define your purpose, would you say?
Yes, definitely. I feel like me being a lawyer or wanting to be a lawyer wasn't truly about my interior. It was more about my exterior. Like I wanted to make my parents proud. I wanted to, serve my community in a way, but not in a way that truly meant anything to my soul, if that makes any
Mm.
sense.
No, that makes absolute sense. Because I think that's where purpose is really powerful, when it comes from within, when it's motivated by good intent, when it is something that makes you feel good from the inside out and you don't care what other people think. And I think that's like super important, because at the end of the day, we can't outrun ourselves. Like if I'm not internally happy, I could fake it, but how far is that actually going to get me with my relationship with myself? So you're on this career path with hairstyling. What was that journey like? Like, how long were you doing it? And how did you grow through that experience?
Um, Beauty school was a lot of fun. And I like to say that that was my college years all in under 1 year because I actually got to, I guess, party for the first time in my life. And mind you, I was 20 years old when I started partying. So um, I kind of experienced a little bit more of my like freedom coming into my own, building on different relationships. Like I said, really unleashing my creative powers and um, playing. Really, I was playing with life and enjoying every minute of it. And still, like, I really engulfed myself in the entire world of hairdressing, which is, I mean, I feel like hairdressers have a really bad rap, especially coming from like, the 60s and 70s where it was like, high school dropouts went to beauty school. So it was kind of like that stigma that I was also trying to prove like, well, I'm sitting here with a bachelor's degree in justice studies and going to beauty school. So it was one of those things where I made it the best that I could. And I had a lot of fun doing it. I really tapped into parts of myself that I'd never allowed myself to tap into before. I mean, I
Like
grew
what?
up dancing and just being creative. Like, really, I saw hair and people as a canvas. Like, it went beyond hair for me. It was more about like changing people's identity. Like, once you change somebody's hair color, from the moment they sit down to the moment that they leave, they look in the mirror and see something different. It's like an instant satisfaction, not only for me, but for them. And seeing that in people really changed the game for me as far as how I saw people and how they felt about themselves and what just doing somebody's hair can do, for them and change anything that they want to do for their life, for their day, for a job, for, whatever it is. I felt like I had a little part in someone's identity. And I found a
Mm.
lot of fulfillment in that. Like it wasn't just about playing with color and, being a little chemist and, seeing what this plus this could do and what it looked like. Like it was far beyond that. And going to one of the top salons in the state at the time, that expanded even more because it was going into a whole nother business aspect. Like we went to hair shows, in that were hugely ranked in the state. We were competing. We were on bridal teams, and then getting into the whole bridal world was again a whole nother thing that opened something else up. Was like you have a huge moment in this little girl's dream wedding. It's one of those things. For me, ultimately, it came down to I was able to unleash a creative aspect of myself while at the same time finding that I cared so much about having just a little impact in somebody's life.
Listen, I think that's beautiful, and I think at the root of it is that you love the different relationships that cultivated through that career. And that's funny because knowing you, I couldn't imagine you a lawyer, because I think that you're really good at establishing relationship and establishing trust, and you're a great communicator, and those are the skills that make you glow. And I think that obviously translated well when you would transition to real estate. But I did want to stop here and just talk a little bit about relationships. At this point, you're in your early to mid 20s, and talk about when you first met your child's husband. Were you dating at the time prior? What was that like? And just walk me through that, because I think that was probably pretty powerful.
My dating life was very limited before him. I had a boyfriend in high school, who was great. He was my best friend. Really, he was my best friend. We grew up together all through high school. When that relationship ended, I met somebody in college. He lived in the Midwest, so it was a long distance relationship. I didn't learn too much from that relationship other than, I don't know. That one was a little bit difficult. He was, it was hard. It was hard. I mean, we made an effort. It was fun. It was a storybook. Like, I think every girl has that storybook love, first love or whatever. But there was no foundation. And then I met my ex-husband. We actually worked together. I was in college. He was in accounting at this company that I worked for. I was in the mailroom. And it also started as a friendship. Him and I had just recently ended our relationships, kind of around the same time. So we kind of bonded on heartbreak. And we had a good friendship. We had a good relationship. It moved extremely quickly. But then we were together for about 7 years before we actually got engaged and got married and started our family. 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I wasn't a huge dater. Like I said, I couldn't even party. So let alone have a bunch of boyfriends. But I've always, I feel like I've always grown in every experience that I've had. But we were married for a really long time, and we were together for a really long time. We were married for 10 years before we made the decision to split.
Okay. And during that period of time, you had 2 children.
Yes.
So I know that your children are a huge part of your life, and you had referenced them prior when you're talking about your younger brother being born and how you became like a second mother to them. Having had that experience, how was entering motherhood for you from the onset?
I mean, I was excited, and I felt ready because I had a pretty amazing career. Like, I had built up my hair career. Everything was going really great. Right before we got married, he actually decided to finish PT school, and we moved. So we made the decision to move. I actually left everything. We moved over to Lake Havasu, Arizona, and kind of started all new together out there so he can finish school. So I had to start all over again with my career, started a new salon in a place where I knew nobody. I kind of saw it as a challenge. I started, we were going to build a life together. So it kind of made sense for me to sacrifice and do that. And then we got pregnant, and we decided that it'd be best that I stayed home. So I was a stay-at-home mom when I had my first son, which I thought, it was great. I definitely enjoyed it. I loved having that time with my son. It was different though. And I will say, I feel
what's his name?
Cruz.
What's your eldest son's name? Cruz. Okay.
cruise. Um, so it was very different. Even though I thought that I was mentally prepared and ready and, I can do this, there was a definite sense of loss of identity because I had lived my life for so long, so independent, so, steadfast and focused and career driven and accomplishment driven and all of these things. And for me to just be home with my son, although, like I said, I loved it. And those years that I had at home with my children were some of the best years of my life. I lost myself in all of it. So there was a loss of identity. I didn't know if my life was just completely about my kids, and that was it. Like I was just a mom. It was
Yeah.
all day, every day about them, feeding them, making sure that they were healthy. Well, obviously, all the things. I had like puzzles all day long and playing with Matchbox cars and all the things, all the mom things.
So I know they're both named. They're both their names translate to cross, Cruz
Yeah,
and
Croy.
Croy. Croy,
Mhm.
I thought so. Yeah. So Cruz and Croy, what are their age differences? And during that period of time in their early years, when did your relationship with your husband, like, do you think having kids threw a wrench into into just like your guys' relationship as well?
Well, their age differences are 27 months. So Cruz is 11 and Croy is 9. They're very, very
Nice.
close. And they have a bond that I'll never understand because I was an only child. So sometimes I don't get it. I don't get the bickering and the arguments and all the things, but they absolutely love each other so much. So I'm getting used to it finally. I think, as far as your question, when it came to our relationship, it absolutely did change the dynamic because we both made our entire worlds about the boys. It was all about them. It was, there was a lot of moments where we would not prioritize our relationship. Everything became about them. Even if we had a date night, our conversations were always about them. Um, and that was hard to navigate for a little bit, but also at the same time, when you're in it, you don't really think about it because
Mm.
your life is 100% about them. You brought these lives into the world, and you want to make sure that you provide for them, you care for them, you build a future, you're thinking about college, you're thinking about sports, or whatever the case may be. So I I think a lot of marriages struggle through that. A lot of relationships struggle through that early on because it is you, no matter how many things or books you read, because I was definitely a book reader before I had my son, my oldest son. No matter what every book tells you, or whoever prepares you, or your grandparents tell you stories, nothing prepares you for the reality of you brought these lives into the world. You are responsible for what those lives look like. They are a reflection of you. So I think it's unfortunately a common theme in marriages.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a theme in a lot of relationships. Obviously, I've never been married and I don't have kids, but listening to you speak, do you think that being able to focus on them allowed you both to ignore the elephant in the room and not discuss things that you should be talking about, and you could just focus on them and things were kind of brewing? Because I've been in relationships like that where we would just focus on talking about other people rather and never really be like, hey, like, we need to have a difficult conversation, and those relationships would deteriorate because we were both afraid of how the other person would react. We were also afraid of telling them exactly how we felt because we were afraid to hurt them.
Mm.
And so instead, we just talked about other people, or we would, like, basically it was banter about someone at work, blah blah blah. We were going through the motions. Neither one was really present, and obviously those relationships will deteriorate. Do you think, is that relatable to your marriage?
Um, yes and no. I mean, we were together for so long prior to having our kids that we still had that sense of, I guess, friendship. And to be completely honest with you, our dynamic was a little too much of like a friendship because he could he could be extremely brutally honest with me. And once I became a mom, that kind of shifted in, well, now I feel like I'm being criticized and I'm being judged and I'm not good enough and I question my worthiness. Like it wasn't like, the friendship that we had before where like we were like bros, like we were friends. It was a lot
Yeah.
easier than now I'm your wife and now I'm the mother of your children. And I feel like a sense of disrespect in a lot of the things that were being expressed. And I think that maybe was the biggest shift in our dynamic and what made
Mm.
communication a little bit harder because instead of me speaking up for myself and standing up for myself and actually having these hard conversations, I allowed myself to shut down because I was a little bit more sentimental. I was a little bit more, like I said, I felt judged and criticized, and
Mhm.
that shut me down. So if anything, I take responsibility for the fact that I didn't speak up for myself in the times that I felt like I needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. One of the things you showed me, like one of the most difficult decisions you had to make was finally walking away. Now at this point, now you have two kids. You had paused your career, or were you back at work? And walk me through that? Because it must have, as difficult as it must have been a very liberating decision as well.
Yeah. So in the time that I was a stay-at-home mom, I started noticing that I had lost myself in being a mom. It was like 100% mom, mom, mom all the time. All I cared about was my kids. I made their food from scratch every single day. I mean, I love to cook. So cooking was a huge part of me. I was cooking. I was in the kitchen all day, like having dance parties and, cleaning diapers and all the things. But then I realized, like I said, that I was kind of losing myself in all of it. So I decided that I wanted to get in shape, and I didn't. I don't really love
Mm.
going to big box gyms, and I didn't want to take my kids to the daycare at the gym. So I got in shape at home, and I did it with my kids. And that was such a huge influence for me before because I've always been very active. Like I said, I was a dancer and I loved fitness before. And I started incorporating that into my everyday life, focusing on, nutrition because I love to cook and I love to eat clean and I wanted to, feed my kids the best food. So I just implemented that on myself. I created a routine at home. It took me about 6 months, I would say, to get to a point where I was like, wow, like I got in really good shape at home by myself with my kids. They were now always doing push-ups and burpees. Like we would have burpee challenges and all of the things. And that really changed myself mentally. I felt
Mm.
accomplished again. I felt like, okay, I can do this. Even if it's with my kids, they are the reason I am doing it because I felt like I was an older mom. So I wanted to make sure that I was active with my kids. And that kind of brought my relationship a little bit of, a different thing where we were doing it together. And I was connecting with other moms in my community. I was connecting with other moms on social media because social media was like starting then. One of my biggest influences before I had kids was a fitness model. Her name is Jamie Eason. She was on every cover of every magazine that I would find in grocery stores back in, she started in 2007. And then when I had my son Cruz, she was still continuing, her journey. She um, beat breast cancer, got in the best shape of her life. Like that was a traumatic experience for her that led into, being a fitness enthusiast. So I actually was able to meet and connect with her. So she was a huge part of that as well. And she encouraged me like, put yourself out there. Like other moms can relate to the fact that you don't want to go to a gym and take your kids and all of those things. So that started a whole nother thing for me that I felt so passionate about. And like I said, accomplished um, with and by to be of an influence, I guess, to other moms that we can do this with our kids. They're the reason why we do it. They gave me a
Mm.
reason why to be healthy and feel good and be active and take them along for that ride as well. Fast forward into the future, that also brought up a lot of insecurity in my relationship. And I saw some other things that weren't healthy within our dynamic together, because he just saw me as like I was getting in shape, and like I was getting in shape for myself, and to like find somebody else or move on or whatever the case may be. And that caused a lot of
He was
tension
intimidated by
in.
it.
Yeah, I would say so. And as for, I talked, we talked a lot about it. I tried to convince him like this is a me thing. I wanted to. It was a bucket list for me to get in the best shape of my life with two little kids under two. Like it was a thing for me. I wanted to feel good about myself. Becoming a mom changes everything in our lives, let alone in our bodies. And that's something
Hmm.
that we as women struggle our entire lives with. And it definitely grows when you become a mother, because your body changes so much. And as much as I love my body and the fact that I cooked two incredible humans in it, still I needed to feel good in my skin.
Listen, I
But
love
yeah,
that
that
you yeah, sorry. Like I
no, go
love that
ahead.
you talked about how fitness was a vessel for building back your self-worth. And I can totally relate to that. Like my sobriety journey um was spurned by immersing myself in a fitness environment where I saw it's also seeing other people kicking their own ass, and seeing that, it's like, I should be doing that. I've been telling myself for years I should be doing that. Now I got rid of the one thing that was preventing me from doing it. I mean, not the one thing, but like the catalyst for all the negative behaviors that I was demonstrating, which weren't ever going to lead me to a disciplined gym regimen. And it's like when you start seeing the results, like, okay, like now if I apply this mentality to other components of my life, like you're not gonna, all of a sudden look in the mirror after two workouts and see results. And I think that's something that like really, really just changed the way I think in regards to everything when I started to see results. And now, when it comes from working on myself from the inside out, I do a little bit every day. And when if it wasn't for the fitness environment, though, I wouldn't have had that, because that for myself, that was also like an opportunity for me to build my self-worth, keep promises to myself, and just have the confidence to, hey, I'm going to launch a podcast. We'll see how
Hmm.
it goes.
Yeah.
So I love that. I also do understand like how some of the people who are closest to you can resent you a little bit for it, where it's like, oh, now he's working on himself. And it's almost like when you're elevating yourself and your mindset, people get upset because they were so happy being in that middle space with you where they want you to stay at their level. And
Hmm.
I always was very afraid of losing people. So I would be, so I was afraid of changing myself. So I feel like that's very much kind of the result of your fitness journey from the onset. And I think it also gave you a lot of confidence to just kind of face what you were going through in your relationship. So you make the decision. How was that? How did that play out? Because I think you were just getting into it and I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, I totally, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you said. It does, like I think, well, change is hard for anybody, but especially if you have a codependent relationship, I think that makes it even harder. Like somebody feels like you're leaving them, or maybe it turns into, well, now they don't feel good enough for you, or whatever the case may be. Either way, we're all on our own journey. I was doing a lot of work on myself, and a lot of things were coming up to the surface for me that definitely like changed my mentality. Now it wasn't And I also use this fact that I have these little boys that I will have a huge influence on their lives. Like, what do I want to instill in them as far as their
Hmm.
morals, their values, how they see life? I want them to be anything that they want to be. Like, I don't know. They were still so young that they couldn't tell me like, Mom, I want to be an astronaut. You know what I mean? But in my
You want them to be
mind,
lawyers? Let's be honest. No, I'm just kidding.
definitely
I'm just
lawyers.
kidding.
Actually, no, I don't. But if they want to, I'll support it. So to answer your question, a lot of things led up to that decision. I mean, we still stayed together for a few years, but a lot of things were still changing. And that kind of was more of a push every single time that something else changed. And a lot of it was change in me because doing, being a fitness, I guess, quote unquote, influencer then changed a lot of things within myself and opportunity. Like then I decided that I wanted to go back to the salon for a couple of days because my boys were a little more self-sufficient. They could, be without me for a couple of, a few hours a day. So then I went back to the salon part-time, and that again made me come alive again. Like I was doing what I always loved to do, playing with hair, being around people, experiencing people's stories, talking to people about, their lives. And I mean, I'll say as a hair person or anybody in that industry would understand that I have also coined myself a therapist because we are like therapists for people. People feel comfortable once they sit in that chair to talk
Tell
about
you
their
everything.
problems and talk about their lives. And,
Yep.
it's a comfort thing. Like you become part of their life, whether you would like it or not.
I can
And
relate to.
I miss that.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. Like being a bartender and like, people like get very, very candid with what they're going through.
Yes.
Hearing about people's marriages, hearing about their affairs, hearing about their son's problems, hearing about how they hate their mother-in-law, like all these things, and they get really into it. And there'd be times when I'd be like, God, I don't really want to hear this. But there'd be other times where I'd be like, thank God I'm not going through this. So it's kind of crazy when people have that trust in you because they see you as, hey, like you're strong. You seem to have a good perspective and they trust you. So,
Mm-hmm.
As you're doing that, go like transitioning back to work and being around other people. I want to fast forward a little bit to like when you jumped into real estate, because I feel like when it comes to building a book of business from a salon stylist or barber or a service oriented field where you're an independent contractor, that must have translated really well when it came to starting to build your real estate empire.
Yes. And
And
that is
how
the
what
reason why I
oh
did it.
sorry. Yeah. And also, how was it doing it as a single mom?
Um, well, after, splitting, and, getting separated and everything, I did feel like, okay, there something needs to change. And to be completely honest with you, at the time I had my own salon. I had other people working for me during COVID. And in
Mm,
2020, everything kind of changed. So I felt like there needed to be a huge pivot in my businesses and how we were kind of forced to. In Arizona, they shut our doors for like 4 months. So it was one of those moments where I literally got sat down by God and was like, okay, well,
mm,
now what are you going to do? And the fact that I have such a big sphere. I have had a salon business for 17 years. I've been doing hair for that long. I've built relationships for so long. Also being pretty heavily in the fitness world here in Arizona throughout the years. There was a lot of opportunity, but I didn't just see it as, well, look at all the transactions I can be getting in real estate. It was one of those things like, well, I can add another source of income, still have flexibility to do hair and do fitness, be with my kids, go to soccer games, all of the things, while also helping people in a huge decision in life. Because, it's part of the biggest decisions we make in our lives. Aside from getting married, buying a home is a huge moment in everybody's life. And I just, from what I've seen, I mean, I want to say now over 90,000 licensed real estate agents in the state of Arizona. And the majority of those people are not really focused on people. They're focused on transactions and making money. And that is never something that I really truly is a reason or a catalyst for me when it comes to business. It's not
Mhm.
always, it's not about money. It's about people. And being pushed to pivot in my business and in my future really is the reason why I was like, well, I never really wanted to be a real estate agent, but I think it'd be great that I equip myself to be able to help the people that I care about, the people that I know. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of a side income.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one thing that you just said right there was I got sat down by God. And that's such a beautiful phrase, and I'm probably going to steal it. But like, like in this story, your story, you got sat down by God multiple times when when your family moved to Arizona, when you made a decision to shift career paths and not go to law school, when you made a decision to leave your marriage, and when now you're talking about when you're making career change. That's such a powerful statement, sat down by God. How has faith played a role throughout this story? Because I know for me, there's been times where I felt God was very close, and I felt times when God was not very close. And now I understand, like, he's always there. It's just
Mhm.
whether I reach out to him. And that's how I choose to carry my faith. How has that played a role with just defining who you are and who you want to be?
It's an everyday thing, just like you said. Fitness is an everyday thing for you. It's a everyday thing for me. I mean, I every single day I am reminded of how grateful I need to be for every opportunity that I've ever had, whether it was good or bad. Um, like you said, God has always been there, and I tap in now. I tap in every single day. Growing up and going through the motions, I always believed. I've always had faith. It's always been instilled in me. I mean, in my culture, my parents are Catholic, who were practicing Catholic their entire lives. It's always been ingrained in me. It's always been part of my life. Growing up as a kid, I actually, from the family that my mom nannied for, they were Lutheran. So I learned a lot about their Christian faith, and also it did a lot of things with them and their family. So I have always been surrounded by faith. And as an adult, I've understood that for me, it's more of a relationship. I see my relationship with God as one of the most relationships in my life, because I really rely heavily on faith. And that goes with everything. I mean, there's anybody that has ever started a business, you don't start it knowing that you're going to be successful. You start doing it by faith. And
Mm.
so I tap in every single day. I am very grateful. I remind myself in every moment, but especially in the moments where I feel extra challenged or when something is hard, that I get to do what I do. It wasn't handed to me. Nothing has ever been handed to me. And if I see it with that perspective, I know where the source is. I know that it's coming from God. I know that anything with gratitude is 100% achievable, and it flourishes so much more organically and fulfills you in a way that it's really undescribable.
I love that, because gratitude is like so important, and just like the way I have to live my life, where I do daily gratitude lists. And the reason I do it is because when I don't have gratitude in my life, my ego comes back into play. And when my ego comes back into play, I have a track record of making terrible decisions, because it builds and builds and builds, and I feel untouchable. When that happens, all bets are off. So I need to have the guardrails of gratitude in my life so that I can continue to grow in a positive way and impact others. One of the things that, like, we've talked about this. What do you do on a daily to just kind of bring the people around you up. And your energy is really what drew me to be like, hey, like I really want you on my podcast. What is it? What are other pillars of the way that you live your life so that you can maintain a purposeful path?
I've worked a long time on perspective and my mentality. And I mean, I'm human. I have character defaults. There's a lot of times when, one of the natural things that I always do is I'm a fixer. I try and, if somebody has an issue, I'm the first one to fix it. I'll go to the ends of the earth to make anybody's life easy if I can. And that I feel like is a little bit of my ego too, because I'm not. And when I started going to therapy, one of the first things that my therapist said is, "You're nobody's savior." And that one hit me like a bag of rocks. Like I didn't really think that was something that I was doing consciously, and it wasn't, but it does feel me. Like I love to make people, feel good about themselves or whatever, or in a sense, like I said, like a fixer. If there's any sort of issue, I'm running to fix it for somebody if I can do it. But there is a sense of like that expectation as well. Like, if somebody doesn't react the way that I expect them to react, it kind of brings me down. So what I focus on now is do everything without an expectation. Like just do it because of your intention, because of who you are, how it's going to affect you. One of my best, like most favorite analogies is to put our mask on first. Anybody that's flown has been given that speech over and over and over again. You can't save somebody else's life without taking care of yourself. So now I focus a lot more on like the way that I take care of myself reflects and other people see it and other people feel it. And I feel like a lot of people, for some reason over the years, used to feel like it was selfish to take care of yourself, whether that is by starting the day with meditation or starting the day with reading your Bible or starting the day with a mantra or whatever the case may be. But now it's such a priority for me that I feel like anybody that's encountered me in any way sees that and feels that and adapts to that. And that's what I try and focus on is just self-care, no expectations, keep my vibration high, and everything will be good from there.
I love that because, that's kind of a 12-step thing. Expectations are resentments in the making. And, like that's so important. And for me, limited, that was something I literally had to practice. Like if I do this, I can't have an expectation. I can't, because when I have expectations and I get let down, other emotions start to come. And it's just not worth it. And one thing that I've actually become very good at is where I'm like, I'll do a good thing because it's for me, like doing something good for others. And, recently I had someone call me up and, I actively work a 12-step program, and he called me up and he was like, listen, I drank. And, we had a conversation. I told him to call me when he was sober, blah, blah, blah. But after hearing him, getting off the phone, the best feeling in the world was knowing that he trusted me to call me. B, people in general now trust me and come to me with their problems, where before, like they were venting. Now it's like they look at me as a person that can genuinely help, and they really respect my opinion. They want my feedback, and they're doing it for the right reasons. And that was just like really good, feel good moment for me. And that's now where I understand where it's like when you're helping others, it's really about the gift that you get in return. The other thing that you mentioned also, you were talking about basically the essence of feeding your spirituality, and where it's the meditating and like wrapping your head around the fact that you aren't anyone's savior and that you just you have the power to just control you. And I can totally see that with you, because you do have like a very like genuine heart, and you have that natural maternal instinct. Um, and how has that, how have you adjusted to that feedback given to you by a therapist?
It's taken a while, and I actually started actually doing the 12 steps through Al-Anon not too long
Yep.
ago, and that's been a complete different spiritual awakening that I don't think I was prepared for.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it really is. It really is looking inside, and like I said, I realized that it was a little bit of my ego, like it was a little bit selfish, really, like that I was always there to try and fix somebody else, when maybe that's not really what people need. They just need support, they need encouragement, they need an ear, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily for me to come and fix everything. And that's also helping with my relationship with my children as they're growing, because I need them to be independent, you know, members of society that provide, their own will as well to the world in a positive way. So it has really exposed that part in me where I'm really, it's natural for me to pour into other people's cups, even when I'm running empty on mine. And also letting go and surrendering, which I thought that I was good at before, but and it hasn't actually been fully and true until now that I'm truly learning what that means. And it's a whole nother thing. But also, in a way, it has lifted so much off of my shoulders that I feel so much lighter, if that makes any sense.
Mm,
Like
absolutely.
surrendering and letting go, and not feeling like I'm gonna save everybody. And that's okay.
Well, it's funny because I can totally relate to it, because, when I started my program, it was kind of like, and as I progressed in it, I was beginning to understand that I was taking on way too much. Where it's like, listen, I can't control that. That's out of my hands, gone. And I was literally able to unpack it, remove it, and not carry it. The things that I can control were way more manageable after that, because I was just, I could, this is a goal. I want to get it done. This is the steps. I can do that. Very simple. As opposed to, let's take on this problem. Let's take on this problem. Make a lot of problems that really weren't mine. Put them on my plate. Yeah, I could totally understand like that liberating feeling where it's like, wow, like I feel a little light. I have more mental capital to really work on myself, because I'm free of really worrying about how other people perceive me. I'm free of, inserting myself into a situation where if I don't do the right thing, it all falls on me and I have to carry that burden. No, you know what? Y'all can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, yeah, it was such a liberating, it has been a liberating journey. Are there times where I'm like, my ego flares up and I'm like, I'm going to butt my head into this and see what I could do, poke it around a little bit. Yeah. And it doesn't pay off. It doesn't. And, I've been better and better at checking myself when I'm doing that. And I also think, like anything else, whether it's working out at the gym or, learning how to paint or whatever, like it comes with practice.
Mm-hmm.
These habits that we are trying to incorporate into our lives um, on a daily basis. So like I really think that I have a lot more to grow, and I don't think growth ever ends. And I think that's something where I was able to connect with you about. It's like I think you have that same mentality where you're constantly trying to get better from not only the physical standpoint, but like from inside out. Um, I want to ask you a few questions, kind of rapid fire, but like not really, because it never is, and people kind of just go on. But that's fine too. What are 3 daily things that you do to feed your soul or feed your spirit?
Well, I do something active every single day, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's lifting some weights or going to a dance class or yoga or whatever. Something active has to happen in my life every single day. I read. Usually, I like to read like affirmations because that really sets the tone for me. So I do that every morning. And then I do read like a word of the day, a devotional of some sort, to connect on a spiritual level then. And I have coffee every single day, and I have quiet time with my coffee every single day. I think that's important. Before I get on my computer, before I, try like get to work or before I have something that I have to do, that's one thing that I need to do. And that is quiet time with myself. I center myself every single day with a cup of coffee.
Being still.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. My second question is, what advice would you give to somebody struggling to find their purpose?
Spend time with yourself. We'll look within. Whether that's, you find your purpose in your career, you find your purpose in a hobby, you find your purpose in your own story, you find your purpose on a traumatic experience, whatever it is, look within. It's within us. It's not an exterior thing. It's an interior thing.
Love that. I introduced you as Shay, the mompreneur from, I pronounced it again correctly, the mompreneur from Arizona. I would love for you to talk about how you coined that term and what projects you're working on currently.
So actually, along my entrepreneurial career, I was being called a serial entrepreneur because there were so many different things that I was into and, developing and things like that. But the people that I connect with has always been moms. It's always been, mothers who are also ambitious and trying to find their purpose and trying to do, other things. And a lot of my conversations are with moms who are like, how can you do all of this? What do you do? So that really just is the reason. I mean, I'm a mompreneur. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a mom, but mom has always been number one because they are part of my everyday life. They are the reason why I have so much drive and all of the, all the things that make me an entrepreneur and why I'm pursuing so many different things. It's because of them. So mompreneur. And something I've actually been working on for a little while now. It started kind of as a journal, but it's developed into how do I do everything that I do and what keeps me kind of going, what keeps me balanced. So I've developed a book that is kind of like a journal where there are manifestations in there. There are affirmations. There's also small everyday workouts that people can do. It's not just for moms. It's really for anybody that wants to find balance and still incorporate a little bit of everything into their life to make them the best that they can be in a short-term goal and a long-term goal. I also have some of my, favorite recipes that I tend to have and use all the time in my everyday life. So there's recipes, there's fitness routines in there. It's a journal. It's also just like a manifestation book where you can write in short-term goals, long-term goals. And yeah, I'm hoping to be able to release that book later on this year, hopefully before Christmas. I'm working with my publisher now just to kind of tweak and fine tune everything. So look out for that.
Listen, I love that. And the reason why I love that, having you shared your story, you talked about how motherhood at one point became your identity and you were in a space where it's not that it was all that you were. And now you're in a place where, like, yes, you're a mom, a strong mom, but hey, I work on a relationship with myself. And now here's a tool that other moms can use so they don't feel that motherhood is the only thing that defines them and they can still have a relationship with themselves. I think that's amazing, for you to have a workshop or a workbook like that for moms. And so many of them are going to be able to grow and really just nurture the relationship with themselves as they juggle motherhood and their careers and whatnot. Can you please tell my audience how they can reach you? And, other people, I do work in a network with other folks who have podcasts, which after they see will probably want to.
Yeah, so I have a pretty heavy, I guess, influence on Instagram. So my is at Shay Sandifer. I don't really explore very much on any other sort of social media, but you can definitely reach me there.
All right, Shay Sandifer, or you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with Shay as well. I am super grateful that you woke up at 7 a.m. West Coast time to be on my podcast. I hope to head out to Arizona at some point and to see you in the future. Thank you so much. And I am so excited for this episode to drop.
Thank you so much, Adam. It was a pleasure. And I love our conversation. Just like we had in person, I think this one was just as impactful. So thank you.
Absolutely.